the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, or the Pomeranian War, whatever you call it. It was a war that spanned the globe and led to the death of over 1.5 million men, and led to an Anglo-Prussian victory, which led further to the American and French revolutions, and ultimately the Napoleonic Wars. So, this leads to the question, what if the Austrians, the French, and their allies won the 7 Years' War? But first, some context. Why did the 7 Years' War begin? Well, it starts at the end of the War of Austrian Succession, with the loss of Silesia, and led to the diplomatic revolution, where Great Britain and Prussia would become allies, while Austria and France would also become allies along with the Russians, and tensions over such territory as Hanover would ultimately lead to war there. While in North America, the war would start earlier due to territorial disputes and anger over French forts. The war starting in 1754 in the Americas and 1756 in Europe and the rest of the world. In North America, the English were losing the war there until 1758, when they launched a successful campaign when William Pitt came to power, in a time when the French were not willing to send large convoys of soldiers to their colonies, which led to the British getting control of Quebec. Across the pond, the war would wage across Europe, and Prussia was on the edge of defeat until the death of Catherine the Great, and a new front was opened up in Iberia, which ultimately led to peace and restructured the world political order and would eventually lead to British supremacy in the 19th century. Okay, now, with context out of the way, let's get down to the scenario. So how would this alternate world come to be? First, France would have to win control of North America and India, and also have to win control of the waves. Now about Prussia and Portugal. With Portugal, they would have to be defeated in the first Spanish invasion. Now for Prussia, all it would take is Elizabeth living a year or two longer, or Peter not being a Prussian fanboy, to continue the war against Prussia, who was on the edge of defeat by this point in the war, like I mentioned before, and was saved by the death of Catherine, which led to both Russia and Sweden leaving the war. Now, what would happen? That the war is over, and that the Allies have been defeated. First, let's look at good old America. France would take the land that it lost during the War of the Spanish Succession, with lands such as Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Rupert's Land joining France's colonies in North America, which would not be given away to the British and the Spanish in this timeline. In the Caribbean, France would still have control of the territories Tobago, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenadad, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, which would stay under the French, and British land in the Caribbean and South America, such as Jamaica, the Bahamas, Guyana, and other lands, would most likely be up for grabs. They would probably keep a few territories for themselves, but it would most likely be split between the Spanish and the French. Now, with this leaves the matter of the 13 colonies, which would most likely be annexed by France. It would later lead to war between the Catholic French and the Protestant English, who would resent being ruled over. In India, British power there would be heavily reduced, if not eradicated, as their lands would be given away, the British East Company's lands would be given away to the Mongol Empire and the French, with very little remaining, and would prevent them from becoming a powerful force in India and leading the way to French control of the subcontinent. In West Africa, the French would still keep their African territories. Now, what would happen in Europe? Austria would retake the province of Silesia, as that was something they wanted back from Prussia since the War of the Austrian Succession. Sweden would retake the province of Crimea, and Russia would likely take the territory of eastern Prussia, leaving Prussia in a weakened state and preventing them from being seen as a major power, and chances being that they aren't going to be seen as a major power for the rest of the century and beyond, due to how devastating the war was for them. So what does this mean for our world? In summary, we would see a world where France is the supreme power, and a world where Austria would be the dominant power in the HRE, with Prussia basically becoming a minor power for the rest of the 18th century. Britain would be left in a poor position in this timeline, and if they still had 13 colonies, which they certainly still could have, they would likely tax the colonists just like in our timeline, which could lead to revolution. But it isn't a certainty. We would likely see a world where France is dominant and isn't in debt, which means no French Revolution, which means no Napoleon, which would change the 19th century in ways I couldn't even imagine, considering how important he was to European history at the start of the 19th century. But this is only one scenario. Tell me what you think in the comments. And also, please like, share, and subscribe. That really helps the channel. Thank you all for watching, and this is D signing out.